Hello and welcome. Today I want to talk about Earthshatter. This is a slam skill that was added fairly recently during Harvest League, and it has some of the most unique mechanics of any slam in the game, possibly of any skill in the game in general. When you use Earthshatter, you will slam your weapon, or your fists, into the ground, and generate a series of fissures that spread outwards in a circular pattern. Sometimes terrain will deform these fissures, but in general you'll get a pretty even spread in a circle around yourself. Each fissure ends in a spike. When you use a slam skill, when you leap slam onto it for example, or when you use a war cry in the radius of that spike, it will explode, dealing damage. This results in Earthshatter having incredibly high damage effectiveness, because it has 160% on the main hit and around 112% on each additional spike. If you want to be conservative with your calculations, you can assume that 2 spikes will overlap on any given enemy that you hit with your fissure. You could, however, on single target get as many as 3, depending on the hitbox size of the enemy, if they're moving, and the amount of increased or reduced AoE that you might have. Terrain can also help to concentrate the spikes, whereas increased AoE can help to spread them out, giving you more coverage, but not necessarily reducing your overlap, because increases and reductions to AoE scale both the spikes themselves when they explode, and also the fissure length. In short, there's a lot of factors, and personally I haven't found any specific link to increases or reductions in overlap tied to AoE, experimenting with a little bit of conk effect, as opposed to pulverize and ink AoE. The general rule of thumb, though, will be that more AoE does equal more coverage. Now, one thing that can potentially reduce your overlaps is increased fissure length, because this causes the fissures to spread out farther. The spikes are placed farther away, but because it is not increased AoE, it will not increase the size of the explosion. This increased fissure length is a side effect of quality on Divergent Earthshatter, so I would not suggest using it. The other effect that you can have is creating additional fissures. Now, there is no shotgunning from fissures, but more fissures do generate more spikes, and more spikes have a chance for overlap. The ways you can get more fissures are either on a Helm enchant, which gives you +1, or on Anomalous Earthshatter. Anomalous Earthshatter gives you a 10% chance to get an extra fissure. Personally, I think default Earthshatter is probably better than Anomalous, but the additional fissure from the Helm enchant is worth it. From what I've experimented with, when I add a fissure, it does add it in a fairly even circular pattern. But this does seem to increase the odds of overlapping 3 spikes by a little bit. I tried to do a little bit of testing with Anomalous Earthshatter and with the 7th spike, but it was really hard to tell anything conclusive, and it is very impractical because it's a 10% chance on an attack. You don't have a ton of attack speed on a slam build, and furthermore, terrain can deform the pattern, which changes everything. So those are the basics of the Earthshatter skill, and as a side effect of all this experimentation, which is for a build that I will be talking about in the near future, I found something very interesting, which is Earthshatter is a better Groundslam if you're playing Impaler. And that is specifically with the alternate quality Phantasmal Earthshatter. What's different between Phantasmal Earthshatter and regular Earthshatter? The main difference is Phantasmal Earthshatter gives a more multiplier to the primary hit, i.e. the fissures, and a less multiplier to the secondary damage, i.e. the spikes. This front-loads your damage and allows for fairly massive single hits. Now, for all the experimentation, I'm going to assume that you are using this example axe. This axe currently has Flat Fizz, Increased Fizz, and Hybrid Fizz. I know it doesn't have the accuracy, that's because I fudged the numbers in POB, but I am assuming it is as if it had a 40% Hybrid Fizz roll. And I'm comparing that to 8% increased quality. Both are prefixes, but one is much easier to get, as 8% increased quality is a crafted mod, and Hybrid Fizz is notoriously difficult to roll. The effect of quality on Phantasmal Earthshatter is that you get 3% more damage on the fissure, and 3% less damage on the spike per 1% quality. So at 2023, this would be 69% more damage on the initial hit, which is based off of 160% of your weapon damage. With the 8% quality that is added from the weapon, or 10% quality that is added from using a Diala's Malefaction, this would be 31 or 33% quality, respectively, which translates to a 93 or 99% more multiplier on the initial hit of your Earthshatter. So now, let's look at some numbers. I took an Earthshatter build that was based off of Harvest League, that was based off of a Jug. This might not be a direct one-to-one comparison for a Lord of Steel build because it's not a fully optimized Impale build. However, this is what I had around, and I think for the purposes of base comparisons, it's a decent enough option. So if we just have regular Earthshatter with this weapon, with the hybrid fizz on it, it is 6.7 mil DPS. That is a combination of both the spike and the initial impact or the fissure. The max hit is around 3.2 million total damage. If I switch to a 21-23 Phantasmal, the total DPS goes down to about 5.9 million, but the max hit skyrockets to around 5.5 million. What this means is, overall, you get a lot more damage out of using Phantasmal Earthshatter if all you care about is a single hit, lining it up with Fist of War, all your exerts, and just popping a boss with Lord of Steel. Now what about if I continue to scale the quality either with the 8% crafted mod or the Dialis Malefaction? Well, the damage now goes from 5.9 mil at 21-23 to around 5.1 mil DPS at 21-31. The max hit does go up a little bit, hitting around 5.6 mil, but this feels pretty not worth it, because we're losing DPS in order to gain single hit damage, but the amount of DPS we lose is much higher than the amount of single hit damage we gain. If you are geared enough that you're one-shotting everything anyway, maybe do it. But if you're gearing up, your gear isn't the best, and you just want an alternative to Groundslam, I would probably stick with a 21-23 Phantasmal, or even a 20-23 Phantasmal. And what about adding something like level 4 Enhance, or using Dialis Malefaction? And would +2 supports justify the Enhance? In general, no. Enhance, while it might seem like it adds a massive amount of damage, on paper you could say, oh, well, 24% quality from Enhance, that's insane, right? That's 72% more damage. And on paper, that seems pretty good. But remember that 72% is 72% more damage stacking additively, rather than stacking multiplicatively, which makes it a much weaker modifier, because even at 23% quality, you already have a pretty hefty damage multiplier. So in short, I would not use Enhance. Similarly, I don't think Dialis is worth it, because you're giving up a chess piece, which means you're giving up something like Fizz Taken As, you're giving up life, you're giving up Explodey, and all you're really getting is damage that you ultimately should not need. So how does all of this compare to Groundslam? What if I put Groundslam in this same build with this same weapon? Well, if I put Groundslam in, it's about 3.7 mil DPS, which is significantly lower than the Earthshatter. Part of this could be because Groundslam attacks faster, which might feel better, but it is a DPS loss as overall when you're constantly attacking, you're not lining as many hits up with your exerted attacks. And the max hit is around 4.4 mil, which is again significantly lower than Earthshatter. Now, keep in mind that if you use Vol Groundslam, it will be a significantly larger single hit, because Vol Groundslam is a massive spike of damage, and that's quite nice to use with Impaler if you're playing a Lord of Steel build. But most of the time, even then, it is not worth it because you'll not have that many Vol Souls. You won't have enough Vol Souls to necessarily use both your Vol Groundslam and also your Vol Warchief Totem. You might not have enough souls to use it repeatedly, and you can set up better single hits for Lord of Steel if you're using Phantasmal Earthshatter. Also, because the spike damage is very minimal, you don't need to worry so much about Warcrying to detonate. You're just going to hit an enemy, going to be a big bonk, think of it a little bit like an earthquake, and the enemy dies. Except it's reverse earthquake because you hit really hard at first, and then the aftershock, quote-unquote, is far more minimal and can often be disregarded. I don't necessarily advise a Lord of Steel build personally. I think they are excellent for something like SSFHC, and if you manage to pick up a Phantasmal Earthshatter in SSFHC, that is amazing and it will help you a lot. If you're in softcore trade, I would just play a regular Earthshatter build because you will get way more DPS, and higher DPS ultimately means it is easier to kill things. So what are my closing thoughts on this as I've rambled on for quite a long time? Earthshatter is an incredibly strong melee skill. It is definitely up there with the best of the best. It is up there with both Cyclone and Bladestorm as some of the best melee skills you can play in Path of Exile. If you want to play Impaler in either HC trade or on softcore for whatever reason, I would very much advise using Phantasmal Earthshatter over Groundslam. It is not as reliant on positioning because you don't have to be super close to things, it has better damage scaling, and overall, it should feel a lot better to use as you will get those massive spikes much more easily. And finally, my testing with AoE on Earthshatter was somewhat inconclusive. it seemed like overall, increases and reductions to AoE did not have a huge impact in the number of overlaps from detonating the spikes. In general, more AoE does certainly help the build clear because it adds coverage, and it may help single target at certain breakpoints. Similarly, certain reductions may hurt the build on single target, but that's going to vary a lot based on the hitbox of the enemy and exactly how much AoE you have. In general, I wouldn't worry too much about the specifics. Now that I've spent probably way too long talking about the mechanics of Earthshatter, my question to you is, have you played the skill? And if so, what have your experiences been? And if you haven't played it, has watching this video and seeing all of the interesting mechanics given you any ideas of how you might play it in the future? Similarly, if you've been playing an Impale Groundslam build, and you felt like your DPS was a little lacking or your overall damage was struggling, are you going to try Phantasmal Earthshatter? I'd love to hear your thoughts and your successes down in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and ringing the notification bell so that you know whenever I upload. And if you want to support me, you can join the channel for as low as $1 a month to help me continue to make videos just like this one for people like you. If you want to see what I'm getting up to in a more casual setting, watch gameplay live, or just chat with me about various topics, drop by my Twitch stream. I stream Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, starting around 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Thank you again, I hope you enjoyed, and have a great day.